Hello and welcome to the Summit Bid Gallery. Today is a exciting day because I'm finally getting to share my first impressions of the Sony A1. I've been using this camera for a little over a month now, and I feel like I finally got to take it on a good landscape photography trip and got a really beautiful sunrise up in Rocky Mountain National Park. And I'm finally ready to share some of my first impressions of using this camera, especially from a landscape photographer's point of view. Obviously, I didn't get this camera just to shoot landscape photography. It's way more of a camera than a landscape photographer needs. But I'm super excited about the fact that Sony has finally made a flagship camera, and it's the first camera brand to really do this, make a flagship camera that really is competent at landscape photography. Like before, that flagship top of the line camera was mainly for sports and fast action and wildlife. So it focused on high frame rates and great autofocus, but maybe wasn't as tuned for landscape. It was lower resolution, the dynamic range maybe wasn't as good, some of those things. But with the A1, they truly went for the all-in-one camera that's super good, that has the high resolution, 50 megapixels, great dynamic range. But in addition to that is a super fantastic sports camera, wildlife camera. It's a great video camera, portrait, event, whatever camera. Like it'll do anything competently, and maybe even the best. I think you could argue that it's almost the best that Sony's making in all of those areas, which is really a new concept for cameras. But I'm gonna kind of dive in and share 5 impressions that I have of this camera when it comes to landscape photography, because if you're looking for that all-in-one camera, you're a professional photographer who shoots a lot of landscape or shoots some landscape, you might want to know how this camera stacks up and what I feel about it for landscape photography. So let's go ahead and dive into those 5 first impressions. Okay, so let's start off by talking about the design of this camera. And it may look familiar because it's nearly identical to everything that Sony's been putting out in the last few years. It's almost completely identical to the A9 II. There's just a couple of little things that are changed. Very similar to the A7R4, and somewhat similar to the S3. It doesn't have the flip screen, but in a lot of other ways, the grip design is similar. The battery door and memory card, the memory card door is similar to the S3. It has the lock on there, which is new and super nice. It's not as easy to bump open. Well, you can't really bump it open. And that wasn't really a problem on the A7R4, but it definitely was with Nikon. I've talked about that before. Okay, so let's talk about some of the differences that you not on like the A7R4. And one of those is this dial on the left side, which the top does frame rates, and the sub dial below it does autofocus modes. And obviously you're not maybe going to be using this as much as you might if you were a sports photographer, but it does have a 2-second timer on there, and it also has bracketing mode just right on there. So you can easily get into bracket mode, just reference that you're in there really quick. And you don't have to go into menus, you don't have to set a custom button to do those, and that's super nice. And then being able to change the autofocus modes from AFC to DMF to manual focus, just right there, super quick. And you're not going to bump that one either. It has kind of a button you push down and then you turn, similar with the top one. So you're not going to bump this. So you're not going to pull it out of your bag and have it be a different setting than you last left it, which is that's super nice. As far as other changes, one that is actually super nice is the record button on the back here. Not only looks better with the red circle instead of the little red dot, but it is now a full-blown custom button, which means that before with like the A7R4, that record button either when you were in stills mode, it either just started a quick recording or it did nothing at all. And now you can set it to anything that you would any of the other custom buttons, which means that essentially you have a row of 3 buttons here that you can have do a whole variety of different autofocus modes and settings changes and all of this really cool custom stuff that Sony does. You have basically another choice that's right up there next to the AF on button, and that's been really nice for a variety of things, including for landscape photography. Okay, so another thing about the design of this camera is that Sony opted to not go with a built-in battery grip, which when this camera was first announced, I was disappointed by and kind of knocked Sony for, because I've always wanted to see Sony do that battery gripped flagship camera, and to have it just, not have that built in, have that look of that, that brick of a pro camera was disappointing. However, in actual use, it's actually really handy and nice. Being able to cut weight, cut size, be able to just put like a Peak Design capture clip on the bottom and wear it on your backpack, which is exactly what I did on this last photography trip. It's actually really nice in function. So that's one of those things that, like, yes, I would enjoy a gripped body, but Sony actually, the battery grips that Sony makes are, I feel like, the best. Their ergonomics and design aren't always the best, but their battery grips are. They're the same build quality and material, which is something that Canon and Nikon can't really say with theirs. I feel like they feel and look different than the actual camera body. And there's the button layout and functionality is exactly the same, which is, again, on Canon and Nikon is not exactly true. There's some different functionality on the grip than there's missing buttons and different layouts and all this stuff. So the fact that the battery grip is so good and well designed kind of makes up for that lack of a built-in one. Kind of disappointed in the back screen. It's kind of the same lame back screen that Sony's been using for years. Not very sharp, not as sharp as Canon and Nikon's. Sony has since updated the A7R4 and the A7R3 with A versions that have a better back screen, and it's really too bad the A1 didn't get that sharper back screen. But it now has full touch functionality in the menus, which is actually a really great segue to my second impression of this camera, in that the menus are all new, as you probably have heard, and they are way, way better than Sony's old menus. I can say now that I've been using them and changing settings and kind of learning about this camera, the menus are just so much easier and to understand and so much more logical. I feel like the old Sony menus, like, you could definitely memorize where things were. People would always say, they were like, well, just memorize the menu. But it's so helpful to have it be logical, because you don't change every setting all the time very often where you just know where it is. It just makes sense to have it be logical. And then also when you're in photo mode and video mode, it's not the same menu system. It's, video settings are in video mode and photo settings are in photo mode. And that's just, like I said, more logical, which just means that it's just easier to use. It's less of a brain drain when you're trying to change a setting on the fly, because, even if you don't know exactly where that setting is, you're probably going to be able to figure it out very quickly. So, it was adjustment period at first, but after even just an hour of using this camera, like, I really wish it was on all Sony cameras now. So the A1, the S3 are the ones that have it right now, and hopefully that continues with the A7 IV and the A7R5. I mean, I really think it will. So that's really exciting and nice to use. Okay, so third impression from this camera, and it's probably going to be the thing, obviously, that stands out the most when you pick up and start shooting with this camera, is the Viewfinder experience. And I'm going to say it's a very immersive experience, is the way I'm going to put it. Now, this isn't something that's really critical for landscape photography, right? You don't need the zero blackout, because you're not going to miss something during that blackout like you would if you were a sports or wildlife photographer. But there's something to be said about how immersive and it is when you're shooting. It has a 9.6 million dot EVF, which is the best EVF I've ever used or seen. It's super sharp and rich and fun to use. It makes up for the bad back screen. You can't really use it when it's like on a tripod, which is what you're gonna be doing as a landscape photographer a lot of the time, so that's irritating, but even still, the fact that you have it is super nice. But the zero blackout of that backed sensor, it actually is, you know, kind of, for lack of a better word, fun. It's just fun to use, and you know, you move your focus point around and you click and it just never blacks out. It just takes the image and it's fun. There's not a lot of functionality for landscape photography, but it is an immersive, fun experience, and I just really just added to my enjoyment of the whole experience because it's just a very enjoyable, fun camera to use in that way. So yeah, that's kind of as far as that particular feature goes. You know, for other applications, it's going to make a huge difference, and so, you know, kind of knowing that makes it even funner, right? All right, so what I'm going to talk about fourth is the autofocus, and it's had a lot of hype, and you know, for me, it's lived up to the hype. For landscape, really that comes down to how accurate is it and how fast is it. I guess mostly how accurate it is. How fast it is doesn't really matter. It's just kind of nice. But as far as accuracy, it's the best I've ever seen with Sony. It's easily the most accurate. I have not found it to be a major issue with any of the lenses I've used it on. As a matter of fact, it kind of makes up for bad lenses or older lenses with not as great autofocus. So, you know, as far as that goes, it's really great. In the future, I'm obviously going to test and try the tracking and the IAF and all of that, but you know, from the information that's out there, obviously it seems like the best there is, and my impression of it so far is that that's absolutely true. And for landscape photography, it's definitely really, really great. So you can kind of rest assured that that autofocus lives up to the hype. Okay, so last point, and it's, you know, we're getting to as a landscape photography, what you're probably chomping at the bit to know is how are the files? Because that's really what it's all about, right? Is how do the files look? How do they edit? And I can say that I'm really, really pleased. I'm really happy with them. I was nervous to move back to Sony from Nikon. I never really was displeased with Sony's image quality. It's always been really, really solid. As far as, you know, they've fixed some of the color cast issues they used to have. It's gotten more accurate over time. And so, you know, I've never been displeased with it, but I just loved the way that the Nikon Z7 and Z7 II files looked. So I was kind of sad to lose those when I switched over to Sony. But the A1 has kind of put those fears to rest largely. It's maybe, you know, I guess in a vacuum, if I had to choose one camera or the other just purely off the files, I still might go to Nikon, but it's way closer with the A1. The colors are refined to another degree yet in this new A1 generation. I just feel like they're more accurate, more pleasing, and they edit really well. This camera is very gradable as far as in the editing process. And I just feel like they're just like, you know, that little more refined. And then the dynamic range is probably best in class. You know, you don't have that ISO 64 that you have on Nikon, but even still, I found that, you know, they edited really well, and the ISO quality was really good. I actually took a couple of shots early in the shoot at a little higher ISO, not super high, but a little higher, and was pleased with the results. I mean, it's really, the image quality is really rich and really good, and it's certainly the best you're getting out of the Sony body. So, you know, I guess in that regard, if you really want the best color, and you know, I don't know about dynamic range. I think the A7R4 and A7R3 are right in, they're all in line. You know, those cameras are all in line. But I think I like the color out of this a little bit better than the A7R4's color. It's not a lot, but it's that one little refinement that, you know, can kind of take things to the next level for you. So as far as the files that I got out of this camera, I'm really, really pleased. Well, I have a long way to go before I really know everything there is to know about this camera, if I'll ever know everything there is to know about this camera. But I can tell you that Sony has finally created a flagship camera that is really great, as good as anything else for landscape. And that's not something you could say before. And you know, it's kind of an exciting time that, you know, they're making professional cameras that are good in a huge variety of applications. It just can simplify your life. You don't have to, you know, you can take one body on a trip and know that you'll get great video, great landscapes, and, you know, even shoot some great wildlife. You know, that's a great innovation, and that's kind of what this camera brings to the table. You know, I'm going to be probably using multiple Sony bodies. I'm not going to be using multiple A1s, obviously. So if you have any questions about the Sony A1, I would love it if you'd leave a comment below this video, and, you know, I'll either answer that comment or I may actually bring it up in a future video. I know, you know, there's a lot of information about this camera out there, but, you know, maybe not so much from a landscape photography perspective. So if there's a question you have, I'd be happy to try to answer that for you. And if you enjoy these photography, videography videos, we would love it if you would hit that like button and subscribe for more. We're definitely going to be getting more frequent uploads as we go along. We're kind of working on some other projects and all the stuff that's going to be wrapping up kind of the last half of this year. So definitely more content's coming. We're really excited about it. And with that, we'll see you on the next adventure.